Again, thanks JJ for having me and everybody joining us. So based upon the poll, the top two topics were self-storage, underwriting, and what I've learned in 30 plus years of real estate investing. So hopefully there's some nuggets here that you guys can take away, but just a typical fortune builders disclaimer. I'm not selling anything to you. So no, just your typical disclaimer. There's nothing that's going to be sold here. This is just strictly for informational information for you. But tonight we're gonna go through the underwriting of how we look at deals, and we're gonna also discuss the different classes of self-storage, because there's three distinct types of self-storage, and depending on what you're trying to accomplish from an investment perspective, you can then focus on which one is best for you, and then I'll touch base a little bit about what I've been learning over the past 30 years. So with no further ado, we're just gonna jump into this. But there's three different types of self-storage. And excuse me, unlike real estate, when you hear Class C or Class A or Class B for apartments, it's not designated based upon an area in a city or a demographic within a city. It's more like a class, an asset class. So for instance, they have distinct characteristics and qualities. So Class C doesn't mean it's in a bad neighborhood. Class B doesn't mean it's in a better neighborhood. And Class A doesn't mean it's in the best neighborhood. It's more of a reflection of what the property types are. So with that, we'll go into it. And the way in which we like to look at it as we're evaluating them is we've compared these to stocks. And I think people have a general understanding of stocks. And so we felt that it's a good comparison. So within a Class C, what we're looking at is this is like first generation self-storage. So when people have in their mind self-storage, this is what they think of. Out in the country, rural, you drive up, there may or may not be a fence, and it's just long rows of lockers of garage doors that you drive up to, and it may be asphalt, it may be gravel. Someone may live there, but this is what we consider first generation, and that's Class C. So it's, as I said, typically in a rural location, it's low technology. These are we have a friend who operates these with a cell phone, and that's about it. It's a flip phone, not even a smartphone. So you don't need a lot of technology to run these. They're not climate controlled, and they're typically owned by mom and pop type operators. They're not, bigger, larger operators, and they're smaller. So typically between 50 and 250 units or doors. And so what we see here is that you're not going to really get a lot of appreciation in these. What you're going to see is continual income off of them. And that's why we equate it to a penny stock. So you're not going to see a huge growth in these, but you're going to see consistent revenue, and they're just going to be performing on a good level overall. Class B. So what we consider this in the stocks is the blue chip, and the difference is between a blue chip and a penny is that you're going to have a little bit higher yield. They're going to perform better in an up market and a down market. To give you though perspective in this market, the rural ones have been doing very well. The people that we know have not seen any decrease in their occupancy during this COVID era. And so, but within the blue chip, these are second generation. So these are newer. They're going to be more in a suburban market versus a rural market. And they might incorporate technology. So what we see here, some of our friends who are operating these, they have kiosks. So they might not even have an operator on site. And so you can do these all touchless or, without interacting with a person, getting your signed up and getting your locker, those sorts of things. So in this case, what you see here, the picture is climate controlled, but then they might also have the non-climate controlled on the walk up on the exterior. So they could have a combination. It's still mom and pop operators, or maybe someone who owns 2 or 3 of these. And they're a little bit larger, typically between 100 and 300 units. And so if you buy them correctly, you can have appreciation as well as good residual income. So these are hard to come by. Most people that start off are getting the Class C, and these are a little bit priced a little bit more competitively in the marketplace. And the reason why I say that, I don't know if people heard, someone mentioned that they think self-storage is a good industry right now. In the last recession, I don't know if people know this, but Blackstone was buying up a lot of bad notes in debt, predominantly, I believe, in like Florida, Arizona, and New Mexico, in Las Vegas. And they were doing that to get control of the properties in order to have, new mortgages on the backside. And they put a tremendous amount of money into it, probably close to $1 billion. About a week and a half ago, it came out that Blackstone is going to be buying a portfolio of self-storage facilities for $1.4 billion. And so this is on the front end of, we're technically not in a recession right now. We didn't have 2 consecutive quarters of downward trend. So, but with the change in things coming down and the release of, what happens with foreclosures and those sorts of things, it might be interesting to see what happens in the near future. But the other asset is Class A, and this is what we consider growth stocks. So here's where you're going to see like appreciation plus cash flow. And the difference of these is they're predominantly third generation. They're either new conversions or new constructions. And these could be like brand new facilities. They're typically found in urban locations in the cities. And the big distinction is you typically drive into these facilities. And they have a lot of technology involved with them. So you have remote access. So for instance, in our facilities, we know exactly who's going in because they have their individual code that's key to their locker. And so when they do the access code and the garage door goes up, we know who's entering the building, and we have cameras everywhere. So these are fully climate controlled. And as I said, all of our facilities you can drive into, and they're third party managed, typically by the REITs. In our case, we use CubeSmart, which is the third largest self-storage REIT in the country. But they're typically between 450 to 1,000 units. And what we're seeing is that the size of these buildings is anywhere from 70 to 80,000 to about 100, 120,000 square feet, the largest being about 150,000 square feet. And so what we see here is because you're changing the use in the building and you're changing the program, that's where you get the significant appreciation, as well as you get the cash flow and the residual income. But it takes time. It takes longer to get these things up and running. And so there's inherently more risk. So how are we involved? This is what we're doing. On Monday, I'm actually driving to Louisville. It's not too far of a drive for us, but we're buying this building. It is the ugliest building I've ever bought in my life. And we're going to be converting this into a flex warehouse space as well as self-storage. So I don't know if you can see here, but we have existing tenants. They will be in this part. And then we're going to convert this backside into self-storage. And this will be the loading dock and access where people can get in. And we're going to have about 850 lockers in this building. It will be all climate controlled. So what we're doing is we take bad buildings that look like the building on the left and we convert them into the building on the right. And we just fill them up with lockers. And so we, in the recent, since COVID, we opened up one in March in Chicago. We're 35% occupied in the COVID market. We opened up another one in Wisconsin, in Milwaukee. And we are in the process of getting that one leased up. We've been open for a month and we have 3%. So we're hitting our margins there. And then Toledo should be opening up within a week as well. And we're finishing up the construction of one in Dayton, Ohio. So we have markets throughout the Midwest. But to get to the heart of what we're talking about, how do we underwrite these things? How do we determine whether it's good or a not good opportunity? And the biggest thing that people really need to think about or pay attention to when they're doing this is the fact that people say, well, I live in Florida, so it's a great self-storage area. I don't think there's anything around me. But you can't just say Florida. You just can't say Chicago. You can't just say Cincinnati. You really need to be very site specific. This industry, this business is really down to a 1, 3, 5 mile radius. In the more rural locations, it's about drive time. So, if you're driving more than 20 minutes, then people aren't going to go to your facility. They're going to go to another facility. So when we're looking at this, it's very important that have a specific site that you're talking about versus a general site. Now, if I'm looking at this generally speaking, I can tell you as a whole, the East Coast, the South, and the West Coast are heavily saturated with self-storage, which is why we're focusing on the Midwest, which is underserved markets. And we'll get into this in a little bit. But that's the biggest, when we look at things, if people say like, hey, I want to do a self-storage facility in Florida. Is it possible? Yes, it's possible. Is it highly probable? No, it's not as highly probable. In fact, we just had someone send us a property address that was in the Tampa Bay area, and they gave us a site, an empty lot, and there was 19 facilities within 3 miles. So immediately we knew that it was an oversaturated market. So when we're doing this, you really need a specific address. And what we're going to do is go to Google Maps, put in that address, and then in the front of that address, literally add self-storage near and then that address. And if you don't see a lot of self-storage coming up, that's a good sign. If you see a high number of self-storage facilities right within 1, 3, 5 miles, and it's not an incredibly urban market, then that's going to be an indicator that it's oversaturated. So that is the first thing that I do when anybody calls me up about a piece of property. This is not a very sophisticated tool, but it's a very accurate tool because it gives us a quick glimpse of whether or not I should even be spending time on this. When we get into the next things, you'll see, it's going to be the type of thing where you're going to be spending money, you're going to be doing research. And that's the thing one lesson that I've really taken away from this. So a little bit about my background. I began in real estate getting my master's of architecture in 1991 from Illinois Institute of Technology. And the gentleman who I did my master's degree with and my thesis, he owned a real estate development company that was also an architectural firm and a contracting company. And my master's thesis was a 400-unit development that was $100 million in sales. And so it started off as 1,000 apartments, condos that we were going to do. And through the PUD, the zoning process with the municipality, it got whittled down to 316 condominiums, 64 townhomes, and 16 single-family homes on 50 acres. And so I worked on that for 3 years in school. And then I was also his TA. So I'd go to work in his office in the morning, then go to school in the afternoon, and then do homework with him in the evening. So basically from 7 in the morning till midnight, I was working for him on these projects. And then when I graduated, I also worked with him for 3 years. So that entire 6-year period of time, I was working on that development, plus 2 other ones. And plus, we were also doing some condo conversions of flipping apartments into condos. And so I learned a tremendous amount during that period of time. But when we were doing those large, significant projects, we didn't have the tools and the resources that we're implementing now. It was sort of like licking your finger, holding up your finger, and which way the wind was blowing. And if you build it, they will come. That's not what we're doing here. This is a very demographically driven business. It is very detailed oriented and it's very predictable. And that's one of the things that why I've moved away from speculative single family homes into this market is because of the predictability of it, the modeling it. It's a lot more business driven than speculation. And that's one of the things that we really appreciate about it. And so going to that time, that's why we say you really have to understand your demographics. And we get these reports, we pay money for these reports, and we get access to these things because we're looking at the population, we're looking at the income, we're looking at the density, we're looking at if the market's going up, what's going down. But we're also analyzing what the median income is because that will determine what sort of product we put in place, as well as what the saturation levels are. And so we're looking at when we're doing development, these are the things you're looking for. When you're buying an existing asset, it's also important to know this because you're going to see, is your product underserved? Is it overserved? Do you have economic occupancy versus physical occupancy? Where is the market rent in relationship to the current marketplace? So a lot of mom and pop operators may not raise their rates for 2, 3, 5, 10 years. And they might be grossly undervaluing their asset because they haven't raised their rents in that period of time. We begin raising rents in 6 months. So when people come in, we might give them first month free, give them an economic incentive to come in. And then within 6 months, we're raising rents. The mom and pops don't necessarily take advantage of those opportunities. And once someone's in there, it's sort of like a boiling pot of water for a lobster. Once you're in, it's harder to move out because it's just change. People don't adjust to change very well. So you have to understand the size of the asset and what you're intending to do with the property. So another thing to consider is zoning. If you're building or developing, you got to know what the zoning is. If you're not, if it's an existing facility, are you going to expand? Do you have the capability of expanding it? And if so, what would be involved. So that's an important thing. A lot of people like to do adding value to them. You can do it with pods or building. Those are different things how people can expand a B or C very easily. But obviously zoning comes into a factor as well. And then what are the current rental rates? Is it below market? Is it above market? What if you're developing, what are the current rental rates, so you can model this out and get an understanding of what the asset will be worth once it's completed and stabilized. And then obviously this is the biggest one, market conditions, the number of square feet of lockers per capita. So when I was saying, for instance, that the East Coast, the West Coast, and the South are oversaturated, that's because the number of square feet of lockers per capita, the national average is 7. In those markets, it's 9. So when we're going in and we're looking at an asset, this is one of the first things that we'll pull up, and we'll see what that ratio is. So our Chicago one was under 2. Our Milwaukee one was right around 2. Our Toledo one was just over 2. Dayton was around 3. Louisville will be around 4. And so in each of these markets, we're going in, we know there are people there that want to buy the product, that need the product, and we're coming in to fill that need. If we see a market that is like over 7, over 9 in these areas, then we won't go into them, because what that means is it will be harder to get our rental rates. It will take us longer, and we will not be as successful if we come into a market which needs it. I mean, it's sort of common sense in supply and demand. What would you rather be, fulfilling, a market that needs it or a market that's oversaturated? So that's the reason why when I say this is a lot more predictable than, speculative condo buildings or apartments or those sorts of things. We know the market and we know the buying patterns across the country. And, for me, first and foremost, I'm a real estate guy. I am not a self-storage guy. I'm a real estate guy. So what I'm trying to do is minimize risk. That's my biggest thing that I'm trying to do overall, is how do I mitigate risk? And that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned in 30 years of real estate, is how do I mitigate the risk for my investors and for myself to put ourselves in the best position to succeed. So, and then the last one is just basically physical occupancy versus economic occupancy. And, it is easier to evict people, but people, if you're not actively engaged in managing your facility, they might let someone just stay for 2 or 3 months and someone's not paying. We don't have the same challenges as an eviction with apartments. The way I equate this is apartments without toilets or sinks. And so therefore it's easier to maintain, it's easier to manage, and it's also easier to cut a lock, open up the door, sell the stuff, or in most cases throw it away. So those are the biggest things. So this is an example of a feasibility study that we buy. And, what we're looking for is, do we have growth? We're also looking at what is the density. We're also looking how many households, how many homes, how many doors are there in the neighborhood in these, you can see here, 1 and 2 miles. But then we're also looking at the median income over here. And the reason why the median income is important is because it dictates a locker size. What's our average locker size? So the average locker size is 90 square feet for a general average medium income type community. The more affluent, they tend to be willing to pay a higher price per square foot for larger lockers. The less affluent, they're willing to pay a higher price per square foot for smaller lockers. And so why we see that is, when we built in the most affluent community, probably, in Illinois, but also, probably top 10 in the country, people were remodeling homes. And so they would literally bring a moving truck in, back it up to our facility, and rent 5 lockers at the same time and just literally pack them with their stuff while they were remodeling their home for 8 months. And then when they were done, they would unpack their home and move it out. And so in less affluent communities, where it's tighter to get in an apartment, you're not getting a lot of storage within your apartment. And so a 5x5 is enough space to keep your Christmas stuff during the summer, and then during the winter you move your Christmas stuff out, and then you put in your summer stuff, and it just gives people a little extra square footage, and it's cheaper than buying the next or renting the next larger apartment. So that's why we In our urban settings, which our medium income is lower, we'll drop that average square foot of lockers down to 75 square feet per unit versus 90. And our more affluent, then we'll be at around 100. To give you an example, when our most affluent location, we couldn't rent the 10 by 10s. All the 10 by 20s were sold out. And so what we did is we took out the center wall between the two 10 by 10s and made a 10 by 20, and they leased up immediately. It was just a mental block that people thought, I need to rent one locker, and so I need a 10 by 20 versus renting two lockers, 10 by 10, and we actually made more money by reducing our unit count. It's just a mentality type thing. So here's another example. This is where we're looking at our saturation. This is the level right in here. And so you can see that there is demand. The green means these are good, but in this case, this was 3.16. So we know that within 2 miles of our facility, the demand is the supply is 3.16. So this is unmet demand. So we have the ability to come in and filling this thing up, and we can do it faster. So the lower that number is, the faster we will fill up our facility. And then here's another example of what we're looking for is what our competition is doing and what they have. And so, these are all different characteristics that we're looking for. And then what it translates into, then we also get their numbers here. And so we can project, we can model out what our revenue should be. And that's what we really like about this is the predictability of it. We know the market, we know what product we should be putting in and what our sales price is, because this is all readily information that we can get or we can pay to get it. And so in this case, this is a 1.6%. So that was our one in Chicago. So we knew that we had a lot of ability. And in fact, the normal lease up is about 3 years. It's 3% per month. But in this situation, they predicted we would be filled within 24 months. So in the first 6 months of this opening up these facilities, we were supposed to be in a year, 36% occupied. And we hit 35% in 6 months in COVID. So it just shows you that the power of, going into a good market. We had 500,000 people within 3 miles of this facility, and we were at 1.6. And so we knew that there was a lot of homes that had the need for self-storage. So what has 30 years taught me? And then I'll open it up for Q&A and the different things. But the biggest thing is build a solid team. I mean, the reason I joined Fortune Builders is because I didn't have a solid team. And I discovered some things that were in my life that were going on where my partner was not as forthright with the financials as I would hope, and was not doing things very well. And so I had to rebuild my team very fast. And so I decided to buy the systems from Fortune Builders in order to help build the team. So everybody on our team has gone through Fortune Builders. That's why I promote Fortune Builders. I think they're good systems. My systems caught them, but I needed systems to train people faster and better. And so that's why I bought into Fortune Builders. So I can't underestimate or appreciate the value of a good team. And if you're just starting out, you're like thinking, well, I don't have employees. Well, that's fine, but you need a good team. You need a good realtor. You need a good contractor. You need a good lawyer. I would put lawyer right up there. Making sure that you have a good closing title, all those sorts of things. And if you can't find a good contractor, then become one. I mean, that's what we do. We act as the developer, we do the design, and we do the build as well. And there's different sources of income that we get from that. So those are things that we've built into our business model. And this is what I've had 2 mentors in my life. The first one was my professor, who I worked for 6 years. And then the second mentor in my life was a very profound individual man. His name's Dr. Nito Kubain. He owns Great Harvest Bread and Lazy Boy. He's on the board of BB&T Bank, and he's the president of High Point University. He started off immigrating from Lebanon to the United States at the age of 16 with about 50 to 100 bucks in his wallet, and put himself through college, and then just developed himself from there. In fact, he's won the Horatio Algier Award for Distinguished Americans because of how he's come from nothing and developed himself into a very successful entrepreneur. But one of the things that he really taught me was, and this really applied in my business, was the difference between being a pro, an expert, and then the authority. And here's how he relates it. When you think of a professional, you find a professional in the phone book. and they can help you accomplish what you're looking to do. So that might be a plumber, but an expert is like a very good plumber in that market. So it's not like a rookie plumber, but someone who's been a plumber for 10, 20 years. But if you have a real big septic problem, or you have a big, huge problem, or if you're a doctor, if you have cancer, brain cancer, you want the authority. You want the best person in that field to be guiding you. So in your own mind, are you satisfied with the professional, the expert, or the authority? And then how do you set yourself up within those? So when I began, I was a pro. I would say, the first time I did a spec house on my own, when I broke away from the company, I went to 3 investors, and we wanted to buy a house for $300,000. We tore it down and built a new one and sold it for $1.05 million. And I needed $100,000. And I considered myself a pro. And they said, well, how do you know you're going to do this? Well, I've been doing this for 6 years. Here's my credentials. I've done this project. I've done this project. I've done this project. But I certainly wasn't an expert because I'd never done it for myself. And that was the first thing I said, is like, how do you know you're going to succeed? And I related it back to my training. I related it back to my experience, and I related it back to my schooling, and as well as my team. I said, I got a good realtor. I got a good attorney. I got a bank all behind us. I need $100,000. And I was able to get that $100,000 from the 3 investors, and we gave them a 90% rate of return on their investment. We built the home within less than a year and sold it. And the first thing they said to me is, do it again and don't tell anyone else what you're doing. And I'm like, that makes me think I need to expand this, because they want to control my growth, my investment. But the difference, what I'm saying there, is between a pro and an expert is the fact that once I had done it 10, 20, 30 times, I could say I'm an expert. But am I the authority? Am I the predominant authority in the marketplace for this? And a lot of that has to do with, what are you doing to promote yourself? What are you doing to educate yourself? And what are you doing to set yourself up that people come to you to ask you what is happening in your marketplace? Okay. And it could be podcasts. It could be having interviews. It could be the amount of deals you do. It could be all these different things. And I think that's one of the things that Jeff Fallon talks about and helps people do, is become that authority. Because the fact that if people say, take a topic, retail or apartments or condos or self-storage, and you're just like, who do you need to call? Who do you need to ask about that? That's when you know that you're getting to that level of authority, and that people automatically turn to you because you become beyond the expert in the field. You are the authority. And that's where you want to set yourself up within your market, within your product, so that people are bringing you deals. And that's when that's the biggest thing that I've learned in 30 years, is how to create that. To, what do you have to do in order to get to that level, or to do those different things? And that's what I'm saying, not just knowing your market, but mastering it, knowing why it's going to happen or what's going to happen. For us, I've been through 4 recessions, and, these are not been fun times, especially in the single family market homes, especially the last one, when the whole housing market basically crashed overnight. I woke up, things were good. And then I listened to the news, and I was like, JP Morgan's gone under. And it was like a cascading effect of all these banks closing. And my partner at the time was like, well, why aren't we doing more flips? I'm like, you don't understand. I can't get a loan. Like, we were literally doing financing of multi-million-dollar homes with 10% down of cash, and borrowing 90%, and getting yields that were ridiculous. That market dissolved in one day. But at that point in time, I had already sold a house. And I got criticized for it, but I felt that there was something coming on. The market was too much. There was too much fuel in the marketplace, that I knew that it was not going to be good. So I stopped buying, and I began just selling. I began selling all the different assets, because I knew that the market was oversaturated. Was I a master at it at that point in time? No, but I could read what was going on. I knew my market, and that's very important for you as a real estate investor. So, and then obviously the biggest ones, do not overextend or on the base purchase price, or base it on speculation. And that's what was happening during the last crash. People were buying over asking price. And I see this in the San Francisco market. People are buying because they think, well, in a year, it's going to be worth more. And that whole model is incredibly written for failure. So for now, we are not buying anything based upon speculation. There is zero speculation in our marketplace because we have the demographics, we understand the market, we understand the buying power, we understand how people do it. So we've tried to remove speculation as much as possible out of our business model. For us, this is the biggest thing that I've taken away out of 30 years, because when I was first doing this, it was all on speculation. We were watching what the market was doing. We're like, hey, we can do that. And we jumped into it. We're not doing that at all anymore. And so that's why we rely heavily on the demographics data. Now, is this possible within single family homes? Yes, there is possible, but it takes a lot of work and it takes a lot of effort and time, because the difference in single family homes is you only have data looking backwards. It's hard to predict what's going forward. And that's where the combination of knowing the demographics, the data, and knowing your market is going to help you become the expert and the authority in these fields. And too often, we're always looking historically and not looking forward and understanding what's down the horizon. For me, right now, I'm not going to tell you my political position, but I believe, I've said this beginning, that there's going to be a change in the marketplace depending on who wins. And I personally believe the market's going to go down. There's not as much confidence if Biden wins as there is with Trump wins. And we saw this in the last election. As soon as Trump won, the market shot up and then it cooled off. But I believe, and this is me, this is how we're approaching it. I'm being more conservative because I think the market's going to go down. And for us in self-storage, that's actually a better thing. The reason why Blackstone's getting into this market is because they're seeing a recession coming. They make big moves when there's recessionary markets. And this is where I'm talking about and understanding the marketplace. When I see massive, big money going into a marketplace, those are indicators for me. When I hear the Fed talking about things, when I hear big movements, these are indicators that I pay attention to on the larger scale that apply to my business. So Blackstone going into a recessionary resistant product in the front end right before an election, that tells me that they're not expecting good things, because they know self-storage historically does better in a recessionary market. And then having a plan, but having flexibility in the plan. It's hard to do when when you have a single family home. There's only so much stuff you can do with it. But can you wholesale it? Can you rent it? Can you lease it? Having terms that you can do different things with it. Can you do a wrap mortgage? These are all the different things of having a plan, but having flexibility into the plan to make sure that you survive, that your business grows, continues to develop and expand. That's what we were able to do during these recessions. When 2008, 2009 came around, all we turned our attention to was doing design build for clients. And we gave our clients incredible deals because subcontractors wanted to work, and we were able to get phenomenal pricing for our products. So cash was king. So we turned all of our attention and we kept our doors open because we were doing design build for people, and we were building multi-million-dollar homes. They were taking advantage of the marketplace, but we were able to adjust and meet that demand because of our flexibility. And this is another thing that Nito talks to me about all the time. Best case, worst case, and what most likely will happen. If you're basing everything on best case and you're not taking into consideration worst case, you're doing yourself a disservice. So we always ask ourselves, best case, worst case, can we survive with worst case? And then what most likely will happen? None of our performers are ever based upon best case. We always present what most likely will happen. That gives our investors a lot greater deal of confidence, because if everyone looks at best case, and to me, it's the San Francisco, the Oakland market, that's best case. It's just speculation. If you're basing everything on best case, it's all speculation. And that's what scares, that's where we're shying away from those markets. And then having goals. If you don't have a goal, if you don't have a plan, you will not meet it. So 3 years ago, we began the goal of having 10 self-storage facilities within 5 years. We set that out and we're on that plan. And so that's why we're closing the one on Monday. I mean, we've raised $2 million in the COVID period of time to close this building, and we're getting loan for 80% debt to cost. which is incredible in the marketplace. We're doing this with a conglomerate of banks in the Kentucky market, and it's a 10-year loan at 6%. So we're getting phenomenal financing, and it's the first self-storage facility that they've done. They've mostly done apartments, but they understand that this is, an area that they want to grow into, and that's why they're willing to work with us on this. And so we're sticking to those goals. When people come to us and say, hey, I want to show you this, or I want to show you that, I'm like, thanks for considering us. Thanks for thinking of us, but we have a plan. And right now it doesn't fit into our plan. And so we're not going to deviate. We're going to stick to our path. And so these are the biggest things that I really focus on. I don't want to get sidetracked. I don't want to keep things, keeping me off, diverting my attention. We're singularly focused on this because we believe in it. We have a plan, and we understand what's going to be happening in the marketplace. So with that, here's the overview of just myself, but more importantly, here's our team. This is our, when I say having a solid team, this is who I'm talking about. This is our core team. Martin handles our sales and acquisitions. I met him at Fortune Builders. We both went through our 3-day together, and we did deals together. And then he's like, hey, I want to learn more, get involved with the self-storage stuff. And so that's what we did. And James came to us as a wholesaler. He was a sous chef and a wholesaler. And he's like, I asked him, I said, well, what do you want to do in 10 years? And he said, I want to do what you're doing. And I said, then why aren't you doing what I'm doing? He says, well, I need to do more deals. And I said to him, what if you wholesale this and take some of your fee and you become an equity investor in our deal? We're going to tear down this house that you tell me is a tear down, and we'll have you build it, and I'll show you how to build this new construction home. And he said no. And I said, okay. So he went away. 2 weeks later, I'm on my way. I'm at the airport. I'm at a gate. I'm about to go on a plane for a hockey tournament with my son. And he calls me back. He goes, is that offer still on the table? And I said, well, why don't we interview you? Come on in. So we went through the interview process through Fortune Builder Setup, and we decided it was a good fit, and we hired him. And now he's running, over $10 million of construction annually. And so, he's grown and he's developed, and each of us have grown and developed since that period of time. But we hire people to run our projects across the Midwest, and we try to look for people within the Fortune Builder community. We post those things. We interview people, but we want to continue to expand and utilize the tools and the people within Fortune Builder. So with that, JJ, I will stop the share and turn it over to you.